not winning 90% of your new business because you have some sort of incredible value.
I'm going to take a bit of a different angle.
You know, I've got a budget this big. I'm going to give it to you because you have a really killer plan.
You give a Red Bull to a turtle, what do you expect?
I think that's a dead turtle. So let's move on to...
Cheers.
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 Does your current premium finance company lock you into long-term agreements? That's because they don't want you talking to us. At IFS, we win your business the good old-fashioned way, with customer service. I know you don't always have to use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.
Hi there, and welcome to a very special episode of the Digital Insurance Pint podcast. As always, I'm your host, Tom Reed, and I'm joined by my colleagues, Adam Mitchell, CEO of Mitch Insurance.
Hello.
Steve Earle, CEO of Cheap Insurance.
Hola.
And Jeff Roy, CEO of Excalibur Insurance.
Ho, ho, ho. Happy holidays, everybody.
Is that Santa Claus impersonating Jeff?
We're doing the naughty or nice list today, right? No.
That's right. Exactly. Actually, so essentially, yeah, we're going to do 2022 in review. And I'm sure there's some naughty things and I'm sure there's some nice things there. So as always, guys, let's get into it here. So one of the things I see in the news regularly is people, going back to work. People have been remote for so long. Now there's hybrid work. Government is asking people to go back at least 2 days a week. There's a lot of that in the news. If you work at Twitter, apparently you got to be at the office 24/7. Maybe talk to me, guys, about how that's impacted your own businesses. What choices have you made, and how have your staff reacted to those choices?
I like to call this one the dog that caught the car. I feel like the people all around the world have wanted remote work forever, and now they finally got a hold of it. But I do worry about people's mental health, and this isn't necessarily just a reflection on our team, but so people backfilled not having to commute and being around their computer all the time, and productivity generally went up as most of the studies. But I'm not convinced that people gave credit for the positive things they had in their workspace around, like the jokes around the water cooler, seeing adults putting on pants, and like general interaction. I think I'd feel a lot better if I knew they all joined a dart league, started running, picked up some music, like something else to backfill the positive sides of what an office was. I know it wasn't all positive. So I do worry about the pendulum swing back
to work. Everybody has always been working, but being managed to go back into the office, back into the culture. And we were lucky where we are. We were in rural Ontario. We didn't all leave the office during COVID. 85-90% of the staff continued to come in. They like to come in. There's a thing called osmosis where you pick things up by just being around people, and you can't replicate that with a software water cooler app, jumping on Slack, sending a bunch of texts, all that kind of stuff. There's no way to replicate physically being in the space, doing stuff together, overhearing people, just walking around, having collisions and chatting with people. So that's never going to go away. Is there a place for hybrid? 100%. There's a lot of people killing it on hybrid, and some people have to go hybrid because they've moved to Halifax and Adam's case, but they love the culture. They want to be connected. But, I do concern about mental health. Like if people start turning their camera off in Zoom, or even if the camera is on, you can't tell how somebody's feeling. You can't see their body language as well. And our whole business is built on relationships, and face-to-face relationship is always going to blow away any kind of Zoom, phone, text relationship. So culturally, it's good to have people back in the office as much as possible, in my opinion.
Okay. So Steve, we'll let you see where you come down here. So we got Adam, from what I can interpret, sort of on one end where he's got quite a bit of remote employees and has taken advantage of that by kind of expanding his footprint without actually having to have a footprint per se. And Jeff's kind of on the other end of the spectrum. Where do you land in this?
Sort of in between, because I've got two different brands that have run that two different models forever. So Cheap has always been 100% work from home, always. And it's always been a struggle to try to create a culture. It's a whole different try to figure out how to be friends digitally. And that's a struggle. Whereas at Bald, which is a traditional shop, we've got people back in the office, and it's so much easier. I mean, we had a Christmas party and we did all those sort of things. Whereas when you're 100% virtual, it is so tough to be a team, really. When people can turn it on and off, and it's tough.
I've had this conversation with a few people, and it seems, in my opinion, remote work puts a lot more emphasis on good leadership, right? Like it's much more difficult to be a good leader when your staff is remote, when you can't walk around, touch people, get in their face, when you have to manage by KPIs and manage by text and deliverables and so on. It puts a lot more stress on leadership, which in my opinion isn't necessarily a bad thing, but it does highlight where you've got good leadership and where you haven't got good leadership.
Leadership's important, but if you don't have culture, you don't have loyalty, and loyalty goes both ways, from the employer to the employee, the employee to the employer.
Our culture is driven by leadership too, though, right? So I think those things are pretty intertwined.
But how do you do that on a medium like this? If you work at home, and let's say you're in claims, and you can turn on your computer tomorrow and do the exact same job, but there's a different brand in the top right corner.
I think we have a lot of problems brewing. So like exactly to Tom's point of it highlights weaknesses in weak or junior managers that aren't used to doing this, and even weak teams that were piled together and hiding differently. I think you have some mental health things like hiding in the weeds. You certainly have. It's not as easy to mentor people. You can't tuck a junior right next to a senior. That's going to have some knock-on effects. And I think we're going to have some debt. The thing that comes to mind, you think about code debt, you build a system and eventually you got to go back and tear it down and redo it. It's like we're building up this culture debt, maybe. I don't know what you want to call it, of there's going to be some chickens that come home to roost here.
So let's switch gears here, guys. We obviously recently did a series on M&A, and there was a ton of M&A in 2022. What's your takeaway from all the M&A activity in 2022? Jeff, do you want to go first?
No, just a quick stat. Brett Broadway spoke to our Perth Huron brokers a couple weeks ago, and she said the number of mergers and acquisition last year was 47 in Ontario alone. It was at 57 as of 2 weeks ago. I don't know how many have been done, but I'll probably surpass 65, maybe close to 70 by the end of the year. So if you look at that, the mergers and acquisitions have never been higher. And, have they slowed? Or bigger, right? And it's currently still a seller's market at this point, and it's too early to tell because a lot of these deals have been in the pipeline for 6 months, 12 months, 18 months. It's too early to tell whether any multiples have gone down. But there's still there's tons of money, as we learned from our merger acquisition. There's tons of money, both Canadian and international, and both company money also. There's lots of powder and out there to make lots of ammunition, but it's just a matter of I don't see it slowing down, at least in the next couple of years right now. The biggest challenge is going to be all these companies buying the size, figuring out how to work with it, right? Like they're getting big. I think Jamie from Westland mentioned about building all the kindling wood beside there and not sure how they're going to burn it, right? I think that was one thing that stuck out to me. So it's going to be interesting going forward. Just a couple thoughts from me.
I think that we're not going to see it slow down. And I think that COVID actually caused a lot of smaller, medium-sized independent brokers to say, you know what, this is I'm out of here. The stuff that went on during COVID, companies moving to Guidewire and introducing stuff, like as my friend Jeff would say, stuff was getting done to us and not with us an awful lot during the last couple of years. We were getting handed lists of to get off. There were a whole bunch of people that I think were like, maybe I'll stick it out for a little while. And then life got complicated for a bunch of different reasons. And then a multiple came up that they thought they could never get. And they went, yeah, I'm gone. I don't have the gas in the tank for this anymore, and that looks really good.
Well, and the hill ahead was quite large. So it's, like, not only do I have the gas, but like I'm gonna have to double down and reinvest quite a lot to grow over this. And like, did you guys see the new Aviva CPC?
Haven't had a chance to review it yet.
Here's one soundbite. You have until 2023 to get to 4 million, 2024 to get to 5 million, and that's the cliff edge moving up each year. So, like, you guys shouldn't record this, and I don't want to admit to my wife, but, like, size matters, right? Like, this M&A is not going to slow down for some very real reasons of, like, you're about to start kissing really big checks goodbye unless you can cluster up in the storm, or all of a sudden, for the first time in a decade, start putting on double-digit plus growth.
Well, and the other thing too is, let's be honest, the last 2 or 3 years, every change to the CPC agreement generally has not been to help us make more money. It's to claw it back. It's been gradually going down. People had great results during COVID, but that's because the frequency went down.
My confirmation bias, like I'd agree that I haven't mapped them all out, but I feel like all the changes have been to incentivize growth and size. If you're not growing and getting over a critical size, that's the meter stick that seems to keep moving. And it might be my confirmation bias.
But doing that profitably too, but also being profitable.
Yeah. You need to hit profit. You need to be a certain size, and you need to be growing. And if you're not those, you are no longer qualifying for much. But that's the same fire burning behind everybody, I think, that will keep M&A going, because the alternative, like, there is no alternative. You're about to start having a diminishing asset that's going to shrink in both size and revenue.
So here's the alternative question for everybody who's creating CPC agreements that agree with billion-dollar brokers. Is it good to have partners that are bigger than you?
Well, there's some fun of those talks of just like, those talks aren't so friendly anymore.
No.
Some of them are partners and some are not partners.
They're dictatorial, Adam.
As someone who's been on the receiving end of some of those conversations with large brokers, I can tell you it is a very interesting scenario when the balance of power has shifted quite dramatically. When a broker makes up, 10% of your company's revenue, that's a really interesting set of conversation. Now, there's a huge value to it, when it truly is a partnership, but it's a different style of conversation, one that carriers have never, up until recently, have never been exposed to.
But now it's going to happen more frequently. Like, we did the math, and
Absolutely.
5 of the people in the M&A are going to be 5 or 7 brokerages are going to control 50% of the volume in 5 years. Like, what's that going to do to the Canadian market?
Let's talk about Guidewire. Right, a few years back, you had Guidewire, you had Duck Creek, you had a couple other policy management systems I can't remember the names of anymore. It seems like, from the work I've been doing with IBAC, like almost every carrier is on Guidewire, working on Guidewire, has just selected Guidewire, which is really intriguing. Great for Guidewire. Steve, let me go to you. So what does this do you think, to the broker channel now that it's, in a couple of years, quite a significant percentage of the market will be on Guidewire? Not the same Guidewire, obviously, but...
Tom, in my experience and seeing Guidewire implementations for a bunch of different companies, I'm not really sure that Guidewire knows that broker distribution exists. We're actually, an afterthought that's a bolt-on. I mean, Guidewire is like TD's Guidewire. It's built for directs. It's built for, and this is a company that is, their customer is an insurance company, and their job is to make things more efficient. And if that comes down to getting other people, aka distribution, to put things into their system for them, then that's all good. I have not seen life improve marginally since insurers have, quote unquote, got off their legacy systems and gone to new ones. Like, life is not better for us now.
Well, and I'll tell you, that's because the connectivity isn't there, right? So they have improved their end of the equation, but the connection to your end of the equation has not happened. I do believe that by having many, many carriers on a similar 21st century application, the opportunity is there, right? The opportunity is not as there.
The opportunity is there,
system.
Tom, but let's count the number of portals 10 years ago. Then Guidewire comes around, and let's count the number of portals today. We have little mutuals that are just so giddy about their new portals. Right? Like, okay. No.
Yeah. I will say, in defense of little mutuals, Commonwealth, bless them, went to market with a no portal solution, all connectivity, and their broker feedback was, give me a damn portal. And so they actually had to spend more money.
Yeah, because they asked the frontline people if they wanted a faster horse. What if you could do it in the BMS only? Oh, well, shit. That'd be great.
But nobody can do really anything on policy change where that's where we lose a ton of money, and that's where we need the service, right?
Okay, so let me challenge that. So if you can do beautiful new business, all singing, all dancing in your BMS, but you can't do policy change, why don't brokers pick up the new business? Why do they reject the whole thing?
Because we can't do policy change to anybody. We have these portals for every single company we have right now.
But brokers aren't adopting the new business, right? Where like Wawanesa has it, Commonwealth has it.
We're adopting the new business. Like the brokers are using the straight through processing when available right now.
In general, I'm not talking about you specifically, Jeff. I mean, I'm preaching to the choir on this podcast here, obviously. But brokers in general, like when you look at the broker adoption stats that the carriers have, they're pathetic. They're not good. And CSSI did a survey amongst their broker ownership, not the frontline staff, the broker ownership, and basically said, hey, you can't take away my portal until you've replaced 100% of the functionality, which is, to me, self-defeating, because you'd never do a thing 100% for all at once. This doesn't happen.
Just to flip it back to you, Tom, I guess a couple questions I have for you. How did you make it this year with IBAC, with companies connecting? There's a list of 10 things we're pushing them to do. How do the companies do on that list? I want to find that out. And as for the portals and the companies using it, like we're forced to use portals right now. Like there's no other choice, right? And we've never seen any stats, and no company's ever shared it with a broker, to my knowledge, of the adoption rate of their new business. Most companies are making you do new business, or they're canceling your contract, is my understanding. Like if you're going to mail in an application right now, it's unacceptable for most of the companies. And if they're not enforcing that, then why am I doing it and somebody else isn't? They're getting an advantage over me because I'm putting the labor into it, right? I'm not aware of any companies that are taking paper apps right now that have a straight through processing portal.
We have many in our quoting system asking for paper apps.
But I would argue, outside of interesting underwriting choices, being if I was a carrier and somebody came to me with a paper app, I'd say no, I'm not doing that. It's almost 2023. Why are you sending me paper? Like literally, what am I going to do with this? So, but to come back to your question, there are quite a few carriers who have either have built or are building API connections, but they're struggling to either get the connection built with the vendor. And again, there are a number of really interesting enhancements been made there, but that broker uptake is not where it needs to be, because when you go back to talk about the business case you put into that that API from a carrier's perspective, and you're not getting the uptake, they're not going to get to do a second one because essentially the first one failed. They put a couple mil into it, brokers didn't do the uptake. Why would you keep going? So there's I think there's tons of opportunity, and from an IBAC perspective, I'm still really quite bullish on this. There's a number of things that are we see coming, but there still has to be a lot of work done on the vendor side, a lot of pushing done on the broker side.
It's Christmas time, and this is what Steve wants for Christmas. Yeah, instead of the app, we have to go put it in, push it in, merge it in, upload it in somebody else's stuff. Would it be awesome if brokers could just say, you know what, the new business is in my BMS. Go get it, fetch it. It's there. It's yours. We did it.
Now that is a really interesting thought process. That would definitely put the shoe on the other foot.
I wrote it. I wrote it with you. It's sitting right there. Go get it. Oh, no. We don't do it that way. You actually have to take that business that you wrote with us and put it into our system. It fundamentally should be the other way around. I wrote this with you.
So, simple question, might have a complicated answer for you guys, and I think it's Steve's turn to go first. Is the hard market over, Steve?
No.
Yes.
I say no.
Okay, no, yes. Jeff?
Depends. How do you define a hard market?
Limited underwriting capacity and rapidly increasing prices.
Well, as I said, like I think we have to flip on. I was thinking the hard market was kind of coming to an end, but you see companies trying to figure out how to tackle inflation right now, and all the creative wizardry and math they're using to do that to get rate next year. Like I've got one company that they're trying to jack everything at 15 to 25% to make up for the evaluators not being correct. And I'm not sure whose decision it is to say the evaluators are that far off, but so if that happens and then the rates start driving up, people are going to have capacity, but can they afford it?
Particularly in commercial lines. Reinsurance negotiations are not going well, not at all. And that's going to trickle down to everybody. I mean, I've been to, 5 or 6 different meetings with insurers, and they basically all have the same 2023 to 2040 template. And that's like, we want to grow profitably. We want to care about our customers, and we also care about the environment. It was almost identical for all of them. So they want to grow profitably. By the way, we have to stick through a bunch of reinsurance is going to cost us a boatload this year. So I actually am a little bit concerned about the smaller players and their capacity, because it's capacity on the reinsurance side, from what I understand, is shrinking a little bit. And these guys haven't made money in years, and they're going to need to make money, and that's going to fall down on everybody. And these cats are not stopping. They're not.
No. I want one company every year for 10 years in a row to completely blow up with 10% rate increases. And they can go in a cycle like that. If they could coordinate it, it'd be really nice.
Okay. With that note, let's talk about facility. We obviously did a facility episode earlier in the year, sounded the alarm on facility. That got some reaction, got what we anticipated being some positive outcomes. Steve, I think you spearheaded most of that. Maybe we'll go to you. Have you seen any actual improvements with facility?
Well, when we say facility, let's say the only servicing carrier left is Nordic, right? So I've been in pretty close contact with them, and they're catching up slowly. They're introducing I believe it's in February, a process where they're not going to send you the courier anymore. You can get an electronic document, but they're not sending it to you. You got to go in every day and fetch it from somewhere, which absolutely isn't ideal. It saves them the courier. It doesn't save us jack, other than perhaps the manually scanning. No, I mean, it's still a bag of hammers for the most part, and it's baby steps that should have probably happened in 1994. Really, these sort of things. Like, I've said it on the show before. I freaking hate portals, but I would give my eye teeth for one with FA.
They made a bunch of bold predictions. Like, so what's going on? Like, without pulling my notes out, are they on target to execute any of them?
Let me ask this question, Jeff. I'm not sure who's on the Facility Association board right now, but I know that there are direct writers there. What do they care? Brokers distribute it all. There are deflection tactics by every direct. What do they care if it's efficient for the broker channel? The broker channel writes 99.9% of FA. There's no incentive for that, for FA to do anything for us.
Well, that brings up an issue with in Ontario. They're supposed to be offering it with a take-all-comers market, but I'm not sure the enforcement level of it. Let's put it that way for the directs, because they should be writing a lot more facility.
So inflation, I forget exactly when it sort of kicked into high gear, but it was summer sometime. Do you think for 2022, has that had positive, negative, or neutral impact on your operation? And let's start with Jeff.
Well, I think obviously the answer, it's had a negative impact on the entire industry. I don't think you can't say it hasn't. From a standpoint of most policies are written at a premium and a limit, and that limit's changed throughout the year, and to the point where a lot of companies feel that the calculators aren't accurate, so they're not getting the proper premium to pay the losses. And with the cat losses, with the RECO going through Ontario, the hurricane in Eastern Canada, the different things that have happened throughout the year, and I think the cat losses have been pretty bad again this year, that the premiums, they're just seeing a big gap between the two right now. So your chart, your loss ratio is going to be 10 or 20% higher if you're not getting the proper premium at this point. So that's, in my opinion, has had a negative effect. Yes, premiums are going up for inflation and people are seeing some of the renewals go up, but they're not going up to the right level. And if the company's not getting the proper premium and they get into reinsurance claims, that's going to drive reinsurance. So you've got reinsurance rate increases potentially going through obviously this year, and you got inflationary. So what's that going to do to the consumer?
Good question. All right, Adam, let's maybe I'll get you to talk about it from the pure brokerage perspective. Forget the rest of the industry. Jeff's covered that off. From a pure brokerage channel impact.
I think the biggest one is it ran into the tailwind that was already the talent wars. And so you had wage increases and inflation in that, and people sort of jumping back and forth even more between job switching. I don't know if it affected a lot of our raw goods and cost. I mean, the lease is pretty fixed, and our next biggest expense is people. But yeah, we heard sort of around the board sort of mid-year true ups and bonuses and things that were generally, as a brokerage, you had to sort of take that on the chin, because like rates have not increased yet. We know they may, and then revenue could come with it, but you're going to have retention issues and things with that. So you had to front out wage increases before the revenue came.
Well, interesting enough, I think that's one of the biggest things that the Bank of Canada worry about, is that wage price spiral, where people see the cost of groceries going up 11% year on year. Yet there's, normally speaking, their paycheck would have gone up 3 or 4% or whatever, and they're coming to you and saying, "Hey, I need more money because the other guy down the street's offering me more money," right? That kind of spiral ends up being, essentially bad for everybody. Steve, do you want to add on top of that?
Yeah, exactly what Adam was saying. Like the things that sort of scare me or worry me or keep me up at night. Like I go to the grocery store and I see the increases too, and I worry about people that we pay. Like this has gone up X, and how are they going to afford it? So I mean, these are all people in your team that you care about, and their mouths you have to feed as a business owner, and you want to make sure that they're fed. So those are the things you think about. But that at the same time, you've got bullshit inefficiencies coming down from insurance companies that are actually costing you more money and eroding your margin, which affects your ability to pay. Like we want to pay everybody that we have more. All of us here, we want to pay everybody more. We do. And we have to be more efficient to do it. And we need our insurance suppliers to get alongside to remove steps so that we can actually, reduce costs instead of add costs, so that we can pay these people more, because they goddamn well deserve it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point, Steve and Adam. I think also you bring that point about efficiency. What did our BMS vendors do? We're looking at 8-9% increase. They quickly got their pound of flesh, and our technology is quickly becoming 3, 4, 5%, even 6% of our expense ratio. It's climbing drastically, right? And we're not getting the improved efficiencies for that increase in cost. We're not handling any more policies per client. We're not getting rid of friction. It hasn't improved in proportion to what we're paying, right? Which is an issue on top of that.
Is your business in better or worse shape as at the end of 22 versus the beginning of 2022? And super quickly, why?
I would say, unfortunately, I want to be better every year, but I would say we're probably more neutral. And I would say why. I would say all the friction from our insurance companies, struggles with claims, having to do extra work, just not getting the efficiencies and not being able to improve efficiencies with our technology because of connectivity. I would say that's held us back from getting to where we need to go.
I'd say probably the same as Jeff. Neutral to marginally better over the last year compared to the year before, and mostly for the same reason. Some buckets are way better. We're getting some more growth. We're getting some traction on. We're doing, but the back shop is not approved. In fact, that's got more complicated, and there's a bit more friction there.
Adam, last word.
I'm going to go with better. And I share a quote that just came yesterday from a friend that's been watching our brand. And the quote is, "It's insane how far you've come with this stuff from when you first took it over." And I think we can get stuck inside it, really struggling. And when you step back and look at it, we replatformed a lot. We rebranded, reorganized, went through a lot of different struggles and things. But I think now at a better place. The one caveat I'll put on is I'm a little afraid of not knowing what I don't know. Back to that staffing and where the world's going to swing, it feels a little precarious.
That is a good way to end the 2022 interview. It's all a little precarious. I think that's what everybody would agree with that statement. Shout out to our sponsor, IFS Premium Finance. Jay, thanks very much for all your support, as well as Garrison's Brewery.
Is retention important to your brokerage? Of course it is. That's why at IFS, we have a cancellation prevention process. Want more details? Give us a call. I know you don't always use a premium finance company, but when you do, you should use IFS. Cheers.